And Tom, you're joining us from Hong Kong. It's great to speak to you. Given what you do, given that you're a Hong Kong-based independent newspaper, I have to ask you, you look at this verdict and you think what?
I think it was expected, to be honest. The reaction locally among journalists is already baked in. Your reporter just mentioned the Committee to Protect Journalists. The local Journalists Association pretty much said in the last hour that we have already all made adjustments in light of this trial. There's been 1,000 journalists out of work, a dozen odd news outlets disbanded, and Apple Daily wasn't the only newsroom to be raided. Last year, some top editors from Stan News were sentenced to 21 months. So in one sense, we are able to report on that trial and, bear witness that the courts, the legislature, ask questions of top officials and report the hard news as an independent outlet. But on the other hand, it means that the opinion section for some years now has been considered to be, rather spicy. You have to be careful and selective. And those sensitive topics have expanded to calls for sanctions, calls for independence, interactions with wanted activists. So it's a very difficult, complicated, I think, situation for the local media, but there are still some independent voices like ours still around.
I was going to ask you about that. When you see one of Hong Kong's most famous, richest, and formerly most powerful men be jailed and now convicted because his newspaper printed, quote, seditious articles, you've got to be asking yourself questions about what you can and cannot print.
Well, we've been asking those questions, for 5 years in the era of the security law, and it takes up a lot of my bandwidth navigating those red lines that aren't always clear. Some journalists in mainland China sympathize with that situation here because it can often be a little more clear, over the border. The Apple Daily, as much as it was, a colourful, grubby tabloid and quite sensational, it did also do, investigative journalism. But it didn't do the sort of, we don't do the sort of advocacy journalism that it evolves to do in terms of it very much siding with the opposition movement, printing protest posters. I mean, nevertheless, what has been coming up in court are matters of speech, I guess. There's 156 op-eds they looked at, interviews, online shows, his interactions with outside groups. Some of it was before the security law came in, but Security Judge Esther To, handpicked by the authorities, said that you can't do any of this with nefarious means.
This Jimmy Lai conviction is part of a much bigger story of mainland China extending and asserting ever more control over Hong Kong. And, the specific identity of Hong Kong is something Hong Kongers fought for and fought to protect. They blocked roads, they fought police, they went on strike, they took risks. Many of them have had to flee the territory. How do Hong Kongers, those who are still in Hong Kong now, feel about this state of affairs?
Well, there was a 30-odd year pro-democracy movement in the wake of the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. And a lot of that sort of exploded in 2019 with those months-long protests. Just yesterday, the biggest opposition party, the Democratic Party, said it will be disbanding. We just had a patriots-only election where the candidates were pre-selected, pre-approved, and the second lowest turnout in that. So it's an intense few weeks for Hong Kong, not to mention a huge fire that killed 160-odd people up in the New Territories. As for, how people locally feel, it's very difficult, of course, for folks to express opinions about these things. And there aren't, reputable pollsters that are putting out surveys. People are very loud of, those Hong Kongers who have left in their thousands abroad, the diaspora. And we've heard from press freedom groups such as Reporters Without Borders calling this, an outrageous, disgraceful act of persecution as well. And the UK, the US also urging for his release. But our eyes now are going to be on the sentencing in January. I'm sure his health will be mentioned then. His children and many have been very concerned about his ailing health. He's 78 years old last week. but it's going to be January 12th when we hear those mitigation statements ahead of the sentencing, which could be life behind bars.
Tom Grundy, editor-in-chief of the Hong Kong Free Press. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.